Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the next episode of
The Toronto Defiant will not be denied.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a very, very exciting episode of CA Esports. As you guys can see, we are joined by the head coach of the Toronto Ultra, who went on, one of the most miraculous seasons runs that we've seen, obviously, as being a Toronto fan. And not only was it an incredible season to be a Toronto fan, but just a really surprising season overall. So I'm super excited to finally have, the head coach on here to kind of talk about the season as a whole and some of the roster decisions that were made and really how he was able to kind of help guide that team into the finish that we had. And of course, talking about MarkyB. So MarkyB, thank you very much for coming on.
Appreciate you guys having me. I've watched the show quite a few times, so it's good to be talking to you guys eventually.
Yeah, I know. I was going to say,
I just thought my mom and my dog watched the show, but next in person, that's great. So 3.
Yeah, I was going to say they must have had a few different laughs, and Chris and I were sitting here going to be like, oh man, Ultra, they're never going to be a top 4 team, where they're seeing their only dark horse. And obviously you guys, not only did you show us wrong, which I mean, fair enough, fair play, but I think you also proved a lot of different people wrong like throughout the year. I mean, I if you can dish out, you gotta be able to take it, and we give a lot of opinions on here. I think sometimes we come on top it, and sometimes we don't. And this was one of those times. Yeah, this was one of those times where, obviously I thought I had a pretty good grasp as to where Ultra was going to be this year, and you guys very clearly exceeded those expectations. So, obviously, just kind of getting started here, we can kind of just sort of jump into things. Before we really get into the nitty gritty in terms of Ultra, MarkyB, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe how you got introduced into not only the competitive scene of Call of Duty, but also maybe the coaching role of Toronto Ultra as well.
There's been a lot of, I've seen a lot of content on you. It's back when you were a player in 2013 and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I was obviously a player originally and had I'd say semi-successful. Like at that point in time, there was definitely a big disconnect between the European region and North American region. I had a lot of European events where I was placing first and second and things along those lines, and some decent international placings. But I'd say for in terms of Call of Duty at that stage, it was more so dominated by North America. My team was actually the first team to place top 8 at a international event in America, and that was in 2014, I want to say. So there had already been several years of European teams going to America and not doing too great, so we eventually broke that spree. And then obviously sort of fast forward a few years, international competitions here or there, doing decent, some top 6 finishes, some top 4 finishes, some more European events. It went towards the 2018 season, and then during World War II, I had a couple of opportunities to qualify for the Pro League that year. Didn't fail to qualify. I had maybe 2 or 3 qualification matches, which I lost all 3 of them. So losing the last hurdle to that pro level was sort of the straw that broke the camel's back, really, and I really wanted to still compete, but I didn't feel like I was getting the opportunities that I did previously. My sort of reputation was at its lowest point, I'd say, since I became a pro, and I'd believed internally that I could still compete at that level, and I knew I could, but it's more so just me being smart, I guess, about the situation I was in and still wanting to contribute to a winning team. And at that point in time, Splice were one of the top 2 European teams, and I had a lot of connections with those guys there. I'd worked previously with them, teamed with some of those guys, so naturally I just transitioned into that position. And honestly, internally as well, at that point, I knew there was discussions about franchising, and I knew the overactive media were involved with Splice, and that there was that defiant connection there. So that was another thing that kind of enticed me to that position, and then it transitioned from European team to North American team, and then back, and then we started with Toronto Ultra, and the first season of Modern Warfare.
Talk about being not only getting into Splice, but being there at the right time as well, right when it was all kind of hitting the fan. I'm actually really curious because obviously as a player and a coach, you guys both have to have really, really, really deep knowledges of the game. But for you, what do you think is the biggest difference in the skill set you probably needed to develop when you made that transition from playing to coaching that you didn't need when you were just playing?
I definitely had the bit of an ego. I guess when it came to when I first started coaching, I thought that I was always a captain of all my rosters, and I was always known as having a great Call of Duty brain. But putting all that together in like a coaching role, you just almost assume like, oh, I've got the brain, I've got the leadership skills from a team perspective, from in-game perspective. But I really don't think I started to become a good coach until last year. To be honest, I was more so just kind of creating strategy and stuff along those lines, I'd say initially. And my first season as Modern Warfare as Toronto Ultra coach, I was actually hired as the strategic coach, so I wasn't actually head coach. So yeah, I'd say that's like the kind of biggest thing for me, is just developing my ability to sort of bring the team together outside the game and really be that leadership figure from a coaching perspective rather than like an in-game perspective. It's hard to explain. I think there's a lot that goes into it, and a lot of learning over the last few years. I'd say a lot of it comes down to me being surrounded by the right people at Toronto. There's a lot of great like leaders over here, a lot of people that I've learned from over the years, and like that's kind of been my mentality. That I know I'm not a good coach in a way. And I think that's the kind of realistically, Call of Duty esports and esports in general, we're all young coaches and we're all kind of just learning as we go. We do have the kind of high knowledge that other people don't, which is what is needed at the end of the day. It's probably one of the most important things, but it's definitely still like a big learning curve, and I still got a long way to go. And I think there's a lot of good coaches out there in sport, etc., that you can look to learn from. But I'd say definitely that's been something I've been really truly working on the last couple of years.
Yeah, and obviously I think it's incredibly important, right? The ability to combine both the strategic aspects that a coach should bring, but also in terms of keeping everybody on the same page and everybody motivated. And there's a few different times, I think, throughout the year where that really shone through, right? Where I think some other teams in those situations, I mean, obviously we're getting ahead of ourselves, but specifically that reverse sweep versus Minnesota, right? Could have been easy to sort of sit there and maybe crumble, but the fact that you guys were able to bounce back in such a decisive fashion, right, and going to champs, and it seemed like nothing changed at all. I think obviously I'm sure there's some, I'm not going to give you all the credit. I'm sure the players also had a lot to do with that as well, and maybe some people specifically as well, but I think that also goes a long way to really credit you as a head coach as well, to really being able to help your team kind of refocus and re-engage and act as if, hey, that's just a map, like nothing ever happened, right? You go back into champs and you perform just as good as you were beforehand.
Yeah, I think that our team's sort of been built around our ability to like bounce back from sort of bad situations, and I think that's just one thing we've always preached. And when it comes down to those like moments, you just sort of got to, you obviously have the disappointment right after, but then you just sort of got to remember what's got you there and refocus. And like you said, I think the players deserve a massive amount of credit for that. After Minnesota, after that Minnesota loss, I think that in my head, I'm not gonna lie, like I think as a coach, you're always thinking like you want to avoid the worst case scenario in certain situations, and in my eyes, I was like, oh, that's quite a hard loss. How are the guys going to bounce back? And like at the end of the day, I'm trying to do everything I can to ensure that happens. But at the end of the day, I can only lead a horse to water, and I think that those guys really, really did impress me with how they reacted straight after the loss. Like they've took a lot of other losses that you wouldn't consider as important worse in a way, like league matches. I feel like the attitudes, like after league matches, some of our league match losses was sort of a crazy disappointment. What you wouldn't expect it in comparison to how it was after the Minnesota loss, but we're resilient.
I was going to say it's really good, and it's almost funny because it was almost worst case scenario where I almost felt like had that been stage 4 or stage 3 at the very least, I would have been like, hey, they got all of the group stage to bounce back, right? You get one big win and that can regain your confidence, but it was like, no, it was like a really tough loss. Oh, and by the way, you're playing Optic at champs, or a Dallas Empire at champs. That's your next match. Like what a tough opportunity to really have to bounce back, but obviously they were able to pull that out, and I think that goes a testament to both the players as well as yourself. But one of the things that's always really impressed me personally, from yourself and from the coaching perspective, I think really has been, and I don't know if this is specifically you or other people in your staff, or you can obviously speak to this a little bit more, but your ability to scout talent, obviously, especially from the European side, right? I know that you had a lot of interesting pieces going into Modern Warfare. Some worked out more than others, but even the ones that maybe didn't necessarily work out, I then think went into the European challengers and really popped off too, right? Like your medals, for instance. Those are some players who you might have looked at in Modern Warfare and been like a little bit of a disappointing season, but then they go in there and all of a sudden they're popping off in challenges again. So maybe it was just more of a fit as opposed to the lack of talent. You obviously were able to find diamonds in the rough like CleanX and Cammy. I'm a huge CleanX fan. I think even when he's going triple negative, he provides a ton of value. But Cammy, we talked about this at the end of Modern Warfare. I was like, this guy, if he can get that consistency, he can be, an MVP candidate. And then sure enough, he comes in here and absolutely pops off. And going into the year, my two favorite ARs were Diamond Con and Insight, and I was super pumped to see you guys get Insight. But he was another player who kind of came in there and just tore the league apart, right? You look at how the community initially responded to that versus where they were looking at him at the end of the year. So I guess my question to you is, how do you really go about really scouting the talent and what your sort of methodology is behind that? Because I think that's been such a big reason why Ultra has been so successful.
Yeah, I think one thing for us is like we watch all the challengers competitions, of course, but like not only that, I think we really like to figure out how the player is as a personality, and see where they fit in with our sort of philosophy. I think like I speak for just our team, we always want sort of similar players where they're very hardworking, like strong mentally, and good attitudes. And I mean sounds very simple, but there's a lot of players out there that don't have that. And I think it's important that you really do your due diligence and figure out where those players are, and just figuring more about just them as people. So like a lot of these guys we've had sort of conversations with sort of months leading into where they're being signed, and really figuring out them as a person to make that final decision if we're going to offer them a contract. And like I said, I think a lot of these guys have really sort of showcased their individual talent enough in challengers that they're good. It's just about figuring if they're the right fit for your team, and if they're the right fit for your team, they're gonna play well when they're put in that position. So
imagine one of the AMs comes out and Mark just comes up with one of those Myers-Briggs personality tests. He's like, all right, fill this out, let's see if it works. I know I've had to do that a couple times myself.
Yeah, no, to be fair, I think we have actually used like personality sort of things. Yeah, there's a test called a Riser test, if you've heard of that.
No, I haven't. No.
Okay, well, you have to do your research into that, but we have used those sort of things, but can't be giving away too many secrets.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's definitely a lot of sort of work that goes into that side of things to figure out the right fit for the team, and not only just from me, from Ryan, our assistant coach and analyst, and like some of the other staff as well, like Borko, who's kind of a guy that's more behind the scenes, but he's like our performance coach, and he comes from like a high level sports background, and he has a lot of knowledge in that sense, and he's been a great person to learn from for me and for Ryan as well.
No, and that's awesome. And obviously, I don't want to touch on too much of the Modern Warfare season here too, because that was 2 years ago. But I think it really showed in some of the decisions you made in terms of who to really keep on and bring in Cold War, and maybe who not to. I just wondering if you want to give any quick insights into how you really approached the beginning of Cold War season, coming off of a really good end to Modern Warfare. Obviously not the ideal start, but I think Modern Warfare ended on a high note, and I think you guys really built upon that. So maybe you just want to share some of your insights and how you kind of created this new roster. No, not new roster, but
Yeah, sure. Obviously, we kept Methods, CleanX, Cammy, and Bance from the previous year, and then like looking at how we knew that Cammy and Methods would be our initial like starting AR positions, and both of those players have tendencies to play pretty aggressive, so I think that we looked into bringing a more sort of extremely disciplined AR into the mix in the sub position. We were also looking at bringing in like additional subs too, to be honest, but like stuff fell through and things along those lines. But our that was our first initial idea behind that, and Insight was a player that actually we would have signed going into the Modern Warfare season, believe it or not, but I can't really go into why we didn't, but essentially he was pretty much like, I'd say a 50% chance of being like our 10th player on our Modern Warfare initial roster. So it would have been interesting to see what would have happened if he had got in at that point, and how that would have worked out. But at the end of the day, I think it also worked out because we'd obviously done a lot of our preparation, and we already had him on the radar from beforehand, and we felt after he had like a very successful start of the season and good season with SNG on Modern Warfare, that he was initially going to be one of the players that we were going to look at for that position. Because looking at both North American, EU, and even challengers, I think it was clear to us that for what we wanted as an AR player, that Jamie was the best option available.
Yeah, no, I remember the only reason I knew who Insight was, obviously Chris and I came from Overwatch and really started following Call of Duty intently in Modern Warfare, but I went back and watched some old VODs, and when CleanX first got brought on, I was like, I gotta figure out who this kid is, so I went back and watched his old Champs VODs from Black Ops 4, and the first thing I said, I was like, who's this Insight kid? Like, I was like, I know everyone was talking about CleanX. This guy's kid looks pretty good. So I was super happy to see that when I looked up his stats after the fact. I was like, oh, he's actually crushing it in Modern Warfare as well, like just on how his team was able to perform. So I was really excited at the opportunity that obviously you guys picked him up, but also there's that built-in chemistry from CleanX, who kind of came into Modern Warfare and was really that spark plug that I think needed. So that was great. And I mean, I guess I'd love to know what other subs you're looking at. So if you ever want to provide any insight coming into Call of War, let us know. But this kind of leads into our next question. You sort of alluded to it, which was obviously when Insight was signed, it was okay. There's one sub on Toronto Ultra. He plays one role, which is the main AR, and everybody kind of knew if there was a change that was going to be made, it was going to be Insight for Methods. And I think Methods, had a decent start to the year. Maybe not his greatest start, but not terrible by any means. But it was sort of corresponded with an overall underwhelming performance from Ultra out of Stage 1 in combination with Insight winning back-to-back championships in the North American Challenger scenes, which I think sort of led to that change. I'm sure you've been asked about this to death, because I'm sure when it first happened, a lot of people are trying to get you on. But now that it's sort of hindsight and the year's over, do you mind giving a little bit of insight into, no pun intended, sort of the changes and the methodology that again went into, yeah, exactly, making that change from taking out the face of the franchise, kind of, if you will, in Methods, and bringing in somebody a lot more unknown in Insight. And obviously you guys took it on social media, but like I said, it kind of came out on top in terms of making the right decision for your franchise long term.
And I guess in addition to that, like, what do you think was that extra thing that changed the team? Because I'm sitting here and like I think I wrote down, like, you guys 4-1 in Stage 1, and then went to like 5-0 in Stage 3 or something. Like, that is absolutely crazy. There was such a massive transition, and you wouldn't think that like just one person just changed so much just off of skill alone, right? Like just purely against it. Because I know Methods, isn't too bad of a player. Like, is Insight so much better? Like,
it's a balance thing, really. Like any good team. I mean, if you look at, let's go through the best of 5, right? Hardpoint. We had two very aggressive play. Like, obviously Cammy was much more aggressive than Methods, but like we very much have like a flex. Cammy will pull an SMG at times, and he's playing super aggressive at all times. And then Insight is always going to be that backline, and really we didn't have that dynamic going, and we couldn't. We tried to build that dynamic from multiple bumps going into it, and obviously, like I said, we preemptively hired Insight because we knew he was going to be that disciplined AR player if it didn't work. Because at the end of the day, you're making in these sort of off-season periods signings based on a game you've not even got the chance to play yet. So in theory, two high progressive ARs on a different spawn system might work. You know what I mean? Like on Modern Warfare, if it was 4v4, it might work better. It really depends. It's one of those things that you just need to kind of gamble on. That's just the nature of Call of Duty esports. I'd say, like I said initially, it just, when it came down to making the decision, it was exactly that. It was, we looked at a best of 5 hard point. We had real issues with that dynamic, and then Jamie's S&D was always renowned to be one of the best, and obviously ended up with the sort of number 1 KD of the season. So it just, those 2 game modes alone, I mean, the drastic changes in those were able to allow us to become a much better team. And then control I think that we were always honestly a good control team. Well, at least from practice.
I was gonna say, I don't know that transit in Stage 1, but
all season I feel like we've been a really, really good control team, and I think a lot of it came down to the pressure that was put on ourselves internally to win that game mode, because we knew we weren't too great at the other 2, or we weren't as great. We were not very good at hardpoint whatsoever. So I think that kind of led to us making a lot of sort of mistakes that wouldn't happen in practice, and a lot of these things that sort of led to those control losses. But overall, I felt that we've been pretty strong on control throughout the entire season, even with Methods, and I just think it was more so of an issue of we weren't able to translate what was going on in practice. Whereas I'd say once we brought Jamie into the team, I'd say it was pretty consistent from what we were displaying in practice to matches.
Yeah, because I remember you guys were like really poor in control in stage one. Like no, not in terms of like how it was, but like no, like let's just be serious here. I forget I don't think you want to control all of stage one. I remember that very much being like a moment where I was like, man, if Ultra's really going to turn this around, like control has to be kind of that mode where they start. And it was really funny to go from, I think, one of the weaker control teams to at the end, you know, you're in contention with one of the best, if not the best. And I guess this really, and Chris kind of alluded to it, because I think everyone has this idea of you guys made the change, you brought an insight, and you became a top 2 team. That's not really what happened though, right? Because you guys brought an insight, you lose to 100 Thieves for a roster that they essentially blew up, you know, the week after. You then go in there and you get kind of beat pretty handily by FaZe. And then I remember this, and I always tell this story. There was a moment where you were playing LA Gorillas, stage 2, match 3. It was a really close first hard point. You guys win. And then you get trounced in the search and destroy, and you get 3-0'd in the control, and you're playing, I think, raid hardpoint, and you're down like 150. And LA Gorillas at that point are like arguably the worst team in the league. And I told Chris, I was like, man, the Ultra might be the worst team in the league. Like, not only did you guys just swap methods, but you're coming in here and you get, you know, 2 big losses. LA Thieves that just beat you are now blown up, and LA Gorillas are like trouncing you. And then all of a sudden, it was like, you guys had this massive comeback on raid. You 6-0 them in the search and destroy. You then go in there and you 3-0 London, and then you win stage 2. Like, I've never seen such a turnaround from that screenshot of LA Gorillas, where I was like, you could make that argument that they're an 11-12 seed, to all of a sudden you're the best team in stage 2. And it was all in the span of like a couple weeks. Like, had LA Gorillas not thrown that map away, like, who knows what would have happened? Like, if that's a 3-1 loss to LA Gorillas, like, it's an insane thing to look back on. And everyone, has the mentality that, Insight came in and you guys turned it on. Like, that's not really true. So I don't know if you remember what was going on at that point, but if you have any insight into how you went from like last to best, like, it was such an incredible turnaround.
Yeah, I'd say our initial sort of week of practice with Jamie went incredible. We were like probably the best out of the 2 seasons. Probably even like this entire season really was that week when we first brought him in, that honeymoon period. We were doing great in practice, and then it came to the match again, and we lost. Inside dropped a crazy amount of kills. We lost really that LA Thieves match, and then we lost that match against FaZe. And after that match against FaZe, I'd say that there was a big mentality shift within the team, and that's where Jamie really became a real part of the team, because I think before he was sort of, he joined and he was just sort of there and he was playing well, but like then after that there was a lot of internal team discussions and like what we need to do better, and I think that was like a big turning point for us. But as you said, we went into that LAG match and it was a very close one, and I think if you ask our team in general, since we brought in Jamie, like when we were at our worst, they would probably say stage 2 even though we won it, because honestly I think stage 2 was a mixture of a lot of things. I think it was obviously us becoming that top 3 consistent team at that point, but I think also it was more so, not more so, but combined with that is also like the fact that teams really didn't know where our strengths lie. So like when it came down to the finals against FaZe, we're playing a lot of our good maps, and like these things are sort of definitely factors that I can't like play down. So like that, one of the things that like our team always says, we thought we were getting better even though we had like worse results after that. Like we got third the next 2 stages, which was obviously disappointing, but we honestly felt that we were better at that point. It's just at the end of the day, it can come down to minor moments in Call of Duty, you know. We lost a lot of close matches in those in all the stages really, and we've won a lot of close matches. It's just the way it goes at the end of the day, and I think that the fact that we've been so consistent since that point was the best thing to see for me, was our ability just to bounce back, because we're gonna have those hard losses, but the attitudes were always spot on to bouncing back.
Adversity builds character, and you can tell how passionate Spencer is by the fact that his voice was starting to crack at the end of that monologue.
I just couldn't believe it. I just remember looking at it. I was like, dude, we are chalked. Like, we're going to get 3-1 by LA Gorillas, and it's not even close. Like, it was the definition. And then obviously things come out after about Bance and him maybe retiring, and he goes and he puts a 1.4 versus FaZe. Like, after that, in that moment of LA Gorillas to the end of stage 2, I've just never seen such a black and white turnaround in between, like how I was viewing that team in that moment versus how I was viewing that team afterwards.
I think the pressure was definitely a factor as well. That failed to mention, like you said, right after we made that change, there was so much pressure on
So
like
much.
everyone to perform for the community, and I think that was definitely a factor as to where we were sort of underperforming as well. Like I definitely think that was something that we needed to learn. That we play at our best when we were having fun, and I think we were a bit too. I mean, listen to our listening. If you go back to our listening against FaZe, that second match we played, it literally sounds like we're at a funeral or something. Like, it's the most depressing listening I've ever heard. And I think that after that, we sort of changed our tune as a team, and we had a lot of good conversations that sort of changed around the mentalities of the team.
Exactly. And just to kind of move on to a little more on the actual, I guess, mode-specific parts of the gameplay. I think that I wouldn't be alone in saying that I feel like Ultra has been kind of a 2-3-5 team over the course of the season. Not in the sense that obviously Hardpoint's been bad. I think I looked at the stats
S&D.
from yeah. So I looked at the stats from Breaking Point, and S&D is like 1.7 overall. S&D's at 1.58, controls at 1.7, then obviously Hardpoint's at 1.09. So still positive, which is great, but I feel like I have noticed, like you guys are focused on those, more those types of game modes. Can you give a little insight into why you think you guys have excelled in those and maybe struggle a little more on Hardpoint?
Yeah, I think like you said, we were one of the best teams on. Well, we're the best S&D team and one of the top 2 teams in Control. And then at Hardpoint, we still weren't a bad team. We were like a top 4, top 5 Hardpoint team. So like we were a 2-3-5 team, and we were really confident in those maps and modes. But we were also like incredibly confident in some of the hard points, and we had some weak hard points that we had to work on throughout the season. I'd say like. We obviously won the Moscow in the grand finals, but that was one that we struggled with throughout the season. We had up and down moments in Garrison that really just when the metas changed and like the way the map was played changed, the way we were performing on the map slightly went up and down. I think that was the one that we had the least consistency on. And then looking at APOC, that was just a map that we obviously rarely played.
I guess it's more of like you're more consistent on the other 2 map modes, and you're still definitely damn good at Hardpoint.
Well, I was gonna say you can't be a top 2 team and only be a 2-3-5. Like obviously we know your Hardpoint was really good, but the only reason I laughed at the APOC is because I remember we were talking to Chris, we were watching that champs final, and as soon as you guys lost, I think they met the Garrison, I was like, oh shit, it's gonna come down to the APOC Hardpoint. I was like, this is gonna be a tough one to beat FaZe on, which is incredibly close. But I guess now that we're Raid, you guys right a little bit up and down as well, but I guess now that we're kind of in the rear view mirror of Cold War, so you can kind of give them a little bit of insights into your map preferences. What were the maps that you thought were your best, and the maps that you guys thought were your worst?
I mean, Hardpoint, we knew we were the best checkmate Hardpoint team, and then Raid, honestly, we had a lot of really bad losses on that map, but overall, as a season, if you look at our scrim records and a lot of we did put some great performances on Raid as well. We have obviously that crazy match against 100T, and we had a bunch of other ones that we sort of threw away here or there. But I think overall Raid we were comfortable in. It just came down to just minor mistakes. Like the way Raid is as a map is very punishable because like it's full 60s on every hill. So that was one of the things. If you make it's a snowball. So if you make one bad play, you mess up one rotation. Even though you're a great team throughout the map, you can get snowballed and lose. And that's typically what would happen in some of our losses, and even some of the maps that we won on that map. It was just a hard one for us to stay consistent on, I'd say. But like I said, it was one of the maps that we did feel very comfortable on. Like our sort of mentality towards Raid is we did lose quite a lot of raids, but we felt like our understanding of the map was at a higher level of a lot of the other teams. It just came down to just simple mistakes at the end of the day a lot of the time. But checkmate again, like I said, was what we felt was our bread and butter, and we were most confident in.
Exactly. I feel like one of the hardest decisions in any hardpoint, let alone let's say a raid hardpoint, is that decision when you have to get, let's say another team has garage and you're like, do we keep on trying to break it, or do we now rotate to basketball to try and get that? Like the decision whether or not when to rotate around is something that I feel like it's hard for me to even understand sometimes.
Yeah, it's a very fine balance because you can get in the habit of just rotating and getting broken. Like sometimes it would be a better idea to put pressure on the previous hill and then you actually set yourself up better. But if you don't execute that correctly, you can just, like I said, get snowballed. And I think a lot, like you said, that P3, P4 rotation, I'd say that was probably our biggest issue really with that map was generally that rotation. We had a lot of games where we were in a very good position going in. We would lose a P3, would get broke, and then we would pressure it too late, and we would instantly get flipped, and they would have P4 control, and then that came to us snowballing the game out of control. So I'd say that was our biggest issue in that map, really. And that was like something we were aware of. It was just I really don't know what was going on in the games. A lot of just it's come down to one player making a call that might be the wrong one, and then it's just. That's it, because our mentality as a team has always been, and that's been trusting each other. And it definitely does take you a long way when you've got that sort of mentality to not hesitate when somebody's making a call. But at the end of the day, when somebody makes that wrong call and you're not hesitating, then it can be a fatal one.
Yeah, I guess you have to really rely on team accountability to really kind of maintain that chain of trust.
Yeah,
I think that's probably what. Kind of Ultra has been doing so well as and stand out as just kind of like the team culture around that as well, at least from the outside. And I guess just to really quickly touch on kind of the loss, the bounce back from the final in stage 5. Tell me, like, did you guys do anything different to really have that bounce back? Like after a loss like that, did you guys just sit down and just do what we normally do and get back on the scrim train, or did you guys actually have to, go to a meditation session and have a group therapist come in or something like that?
And just to add on to Chris too, because I also want to go a little bit more into detail into like kind of what happened with that reverse sweep. Was that more just like a mental thing? You're kind of in the moment where you're a little bit gassed, or was it more just like, hey, the map pool just kind of didn't go our way, and it was always going to be structured that we had the better maps in favor at the beginning, and they were going to have the better maps at the end, and that's just the way that it worked out? Or did Minnesota just do really well at adapting and figuring out your strategies? I just kind of want to hear like your opinion, sort of in hindsight, looking back on a situation like that.
Yeah, I'll obviously start off with the final and like how it kind of played out. I think that it was a combination of all those things. I think the map pool was definitely in our favour towards the start of the series. We're coming in hot at the start of the series where we've just played a match, but then towards the end of the series, that's where it sort of like I said, it went more towards Minnesota's favour. I'd say we were still favoured a lot of those maps though, but it did go the percentage chances of them winning definitely sort of went up, and then I'd say a lot of it came down to our ability to prepare on the S&Ds. Like our team was a team that was great at S&D throughout the season. I think a lot of it came down to our ability to prepare and game plan, especially against like the top S&D teams, the likes of Minnesota. So when we're not able to do that, because we're getting off the stage, we've just won our losers finals match, and then we're just like getting straight back into it. There's no way we can go and break down 4 S&Ds to the guys. Like that's just too much information. We kind of just have to trust that we have and obviously we do have like strategies and things like that in play and a game plan going in before the map, but there's not as much strategy that we can sort of create for that particular map. Whereas Minnesota, obviously, they're sitting watching, they're waiting, they're shooting bots against each other, so they have more time to prepare for those search and destroy. So I think it was a combination of everything, and I think obviously towards the end of the series as well, like the crowd probably played a factor in, like all these everything played a factor, I think, at the end of the day to that moment, and then kind of going into just after it, I'd say there was a mixture of things that went on. I'd say that the guys all got their emotion out like pretty much after the game, like I've never seen a more devastated bunch until the champs final. So like they were very devastated afterwards, and we could have just sat. We talked a little bit, and I said my piece. Everyone said their piece at points, but we weren't doing too much talking. It was sort of just giving everyone their own time to sort of decompress. But then right afterwards, I think for me when I knew it was going to be fine is when Ben Bance came to dinner after the after the loss, because I think just knowing Ben, and he's like very, very smart leader, and he can seem to get the most frustrated visibly. But he was in good spirits right after, and like came in straight away and just sort of refocused all the guys and sort of reminded them we've got champs in 2 weeks and there's a much bigger prize to win there, and it would be a great redemption story. And honestly, it's one of those ones as well, like if you go in from winning the last event, you have that target on your back, and obviously Minnesota did. Going into that champs event, we obviously were one of the favourites going into champs as well.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think it like took pressure off a little bit maybe for champs potentially, where like we knew we were good enough to win champs, but we just need to learn from all the experience we had throughout the season and put it all together. But obviously, we didn't end up winning it in the end. But I think the most impressive thing for me was just the resilience from the players. We lost 2 series back to back, bear in mind as well, because we immediately went into champs and lost that first series. So
yeah, I think if anything coming out of the season, you probably have one of the most mentally resilient teams for the next season coming up. And a lot more, I guess, line experience too now.
And I was just going to say, like, I mean, we might as well kind of jump into here because you've obviously talked about, you know, Bance and kind of some of the intangibles that he brings behind the scenes. And I think that it's important to highlight just because obviously I wouldn't want to consider myself, you know, a Bance hater by any means. Like, I remember at the beginning of the year, you know, some people thought you guys should have brought Classic in as a 4th. I remember Chris and I were very much vocal about no, Bance was the right fit as kind of that person to bring on from the Modern Warfare team. I was very happy with that. But I'd also be lying if I didn't think that, you know, when that methods change first happened, that I was one of the people who was like, maybe it should be a 2-person change. And then obviously Bance comes out there and Fries versus FaZe has an incredible map. There's that whole redemption arc with him as well. And then I still think there was moments throughout the year where maybe he struggled at certain points as well. But again, you look at the finals versus FaZe, and I think that was the best game I'd seen Bance play since Stage 2 versus FaZe. Like, he just seemed to always have those moments and kind of came out when it mattered the most. So I've always found he has a very unique playstyle. Maybe we want to go into just sort of what Bance really brought to the table and kind of how you really made him work with CleanX, because I feel like him and CleanX are just polar opposites of the way they approach that SMG role. And maybe it goes in the same way that you could argue Insight and Cam are polar opposites in the way they play the AR role as well. But really just try to talk about sort of some of the stuff that he kind of brought behind the scenes, because I know I wasn't the only one who thought that maybe should have been a 2-person change, and it was really one of the cooler stories to really watch throughout the year.
yeah, I think he's like a really great frontline leader. Because he's always sort of making plays behind enemy lines and making like the sneaky plays. He's always able to coordinate what's going on in the game, and he like sort of everyone plays around him in a way. Which sounds a bit crazy, but like he is very much like the guy who's coordinating what positions everyone's picking up and like where everyone's going through it like a hard point. And S&D is making the calls, and I think you touched on Toby and him being polar opposites. I think that's why they're so good for each other as an SMG duo, because Toby is very much an aggressive, in your face. You just get him in there and just get him in the mix. And exactly. I think that's where he's at his best. But I think Toby's even better when he's got someone that's able to sort of coordinate what he's doing as well, and someone that's telling him what to do. I think that's what Ben's done a really great job of, especially in S&D. I think they work really well together, like bouncing off each other and coordinating sort of little SMG plays together and whatnot. And I think that's what's allowed us to have so much success in Search and Destroy. So I think Ben is a player that makes everyone else around him better, just by making their jobs easier. Like kind of. He's got great COD mind and great understanding of the game from his years of competing, and I think he's also never been a leadership figure in a team, so that's been a transition for him. So I think as the years went on, he's improved at that role and started to accept that is his role in the team, because originally when he was brought in, he wasn't that guy. Like Looney was that guy initially when we had Looney on the team in Modern Warfare. So Ben was never signed as that sort of leadership figure within the team, and he sort of was just chucked into that position by default. And I think he really didn't fully trust that he could do that role initially, and I think that as the years went on, his confidence is built and his understanding of like he actually improves the rest of the players is in his confidence, his own internal confidence as well is continued to grow. And I think that's where you've seen his performances improve, and I think that's where I think he's honestly just the best piece for the rest of the guys, because he just helps them so much in loads of different ways.
No, I mean, that's great insight, and it's kind of, I think, what I had thought about sort of the intangibles that he brings behind the scenes, and I do think that there's ways that can work with, CleanX kind of being the just in your face all the time, go, 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 getting that information, providing that utility, and then Bance kind of being able to work off that and vice versa. I guess one of the final questions here, I don't want to take up any more of your time. Obviously, thank you so much for coming on. Just about obviously, we kind of do our power rankings every year, and I usually think I have a pretty good understanding of where a team's ceiling and where a team's floor is. And I think that when I looked at Ultra's roster on paper going into the year, I felt pretty confident that you guys were a dark horse team. I saw some people put you pretty low. Chris and I had you think 5 going into the year. I liked your ability to really upset the best teams on any given day. You get hot. I was like, nobody can beat them, right? CleanX is frying, Cammy's frying. You just have that talent. But I always thought that consistency might be a bit of an issue, and I never thought that you would reach the heights that you guys reached. Like just to be completely frank, like a true number 2 team is not what I thought you guys had in your repertoire. I guess my question to you is, why was I so wrong? You know what I mean? Like, what really allowed you guys to be that true number 2 team and really just outperform every single person's expectations of you?
Again, I think it's a mixture of multiple things. I think I didn't truly expect us to be that number 2 team at the start of the season, like consistently throughout a season. If you were to tell me before the season that we would finish second, I would have done all sorts to finish second. I was so excited about. I would have been so excited about that prospect. But at the end of the day, I think that what's brought us here to this point is just overall just the players' attitudes and mentalities. I think that the guys are all came from places where they were maybe undervalued and not getting team offers, not getting those opportunities. So we have a very hard working group. Like, our guys have had one of the most intense schedules over the season. Like, I put them through a lot of 3-day days and a lot of long scrim sessions, VOD reviews, etc. I think that we've just worked very hard as a team. And don't get me wrong, a lot of the teams are doing that, but I think what separates us is, like I said, the combination of that, our understanding of how to get the best out of each other, the combination of the players. I think it's all these things are factors that were sort of what allowed us to get to this point now. But I think that most importantly, I'd say the attitudes of the players have been second to none this season. I think the guys have been top tier throughout, and I keep saying it, and I sound like a broken record, but the resilience was the most important thing for me, and our confidence after losses. Disappointment for sure right afterwards, but going into the next games, there was always a belief we were going to bounce back, and no doubts in our minds about that, and that was what allowed us to continue to do that.
No, obviously incredibly important. I also think it was interesting that I do think, a lot of teams that saw success were kind of teams that kind of kept cores together from Modern Warfare, right? You look at Minnesota with even Major Maniac and Priesta, right? You look at, obviously, FaZe, really successful. You look at Dallas Empire being able to keep the 3 of Crim6, Illy, and Shotzi together, right? They saw a lot of success too. And you guys having that core of Cammy, CleanX, Bance, and, you brought Methods in and obviously turned into Insight. And it kind of seems to be one that did help in the long run in terms of maintaining those relationships and that chemistry, but also two, and this kind of leads me to my next question, it seems to be at least sort of the mentality you guys have going into Vanguard. And I know there's only so much you can say. I understand that the roster hasn't officially been confirmed yet. There's rumors out there. I guess my question to you would be, as much as you can disclose, what are some of your thoughts and mentalities going into the next season? And similar to how you looked at Cold War, where you're like, hey, we have Methods and Cammy, and they're great. Let's add an additional AR who maybe can complement those, right? We don't have that slow and steady AR. Maybe you look at the SMG role, you see, we have a sneaky coordinated player in Bance, and then we have a fast go option in CleanX. Are you also kind of trying to look for that additional complement submachine gun role potentially to go alongside them as well? Are we going to see a 6 Ultra player? Are we just going to see, run back if we can?
Just get to it. Just get to the
question.
Yeah,
just
are we going to see another person?
Just I'm trying to be. I want to give him as many outs as he can take. I want to give him as many outs as he can take because I don't want to just put him on the spot here and be like, hey, who are you guys signing? But what are some of your thoughts and mentalities going into that next year?
Yeah, I mean, our initial mentality is obviously we want to build on what we've built from Modern Warfare and Cold War. We're not blowing up the roster like some of the other franchises and kind of restart and everything. We're obviously wanting to keep the guys together. We'll see what happens, but I think that that's a sort of mentality right now. And then we may have some more subs in there. You never know, but yeah, we're just trying to figure all that stuff out now. Obviously, it's been pretty hectic since champs. Champs finished, and then honestly, you finish like you've just played in champs finals, and you're like, oh, maybe I'm gonna get like a week off, and then you just straight into it. And like honestly, the last 2 weeks have been some of the most stressful weeks I've ever had. But I think that overall, I'm very positive at the moment that we're in a good spot for next year, and that obviously we're trying to keep things going for next year, and I'm pretty confident we're going to do that, and that we're going to have a good year again. And obviously we're always going to, like, at the end of the day in any sport, like you have to plan for future, and like
Exactly.
we're going to look at all the sort of avenues to that, like is there an academy team in the pipeline, all these things, like all these things are like conversations that we're definitely having. But if we do that, that's another question entirely. It's just we definitely are considering all the options right now in terms of our substitute positions, academy rosters, 1 sub, 2 sub. Like, you know, it really depends on what happens. But I think there's a lot of discussions that are being had right now and will be had over the next couple of weeks that will make decisions towards that without giving too much away.
Yeah, no.
And trying to answer your
So
question.
all
I
I'm hearing is
appreciate it.
that we're having another 10-man roster.
Yeah,
That's
exactly,
what I hear.
10-man
Como
roster.
Sal's Academy.
Yeah, we should just do it. Why don't we just have another 10-man roster? Run it back.
I don't even know if that's allowed by the new standards with Spirit.
It's true. That's 8 play. It would be an 8-man roster, wouldn't it?
8-man roster, yeah, exactly.
Oh yeah, no.
I wonder if you could actually have a 10-man. That would be extra. You'd have subs for the challengers team.
Just have
Yeah,
3
or you
academy
just
teams.
have,
Just have
content-
2, and just separate them. Just have
Content creators. What do you mean? It's content creators.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
true. I think it's two
exactly.
content creators.
content creators who accidentally sub in for a map here and there.
Yeah,
Um,
just for a map here.
If sniping's good, we'll just get Pamaja and he can snipe for us.
Just have a dedicated sniper. That's really funny. Although Cammy might have something to say about that, but
I don't know.
Yeah, he wouldn't be too happy about that.
yeah, that's awesome. So yeah, listen, I would love a Toronto Academy team. There's still some really interesting names out there. I think who Toronto could look at, and obviously I think Chris and I will speak on that more in some future videos. So I'm excited to see what Toronto has, and obviously as soon as you guys do release something, I'm definitely excited to kind of hop on here and talk about it. So with that out of the way, that's all the questions I have today. Chris, anything else that you would like to ask MarkyB while we have him?
No, awesome. Thanks for hopping on, Mark. I really appreciate that. You know, if for some way in hell you guys don't follow Mark but follow us for some reason, we'll put your socials in the below.
Yeah, and I was saying if there's any Overwatch fans out there who are
She's
like,
like the video.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, any Overwatch fans who are like, wait, what's Call of Duty?
Yeah.
You know, they can hop on
Trust
there
me.
and check you out. So, no, yeah, again, thanks so much for coming on, man. Congratulations on what was an incredibly successful year. You blew our expectations out of the water, a lot of different people's expectations out of the water, and I think it was a really great year for everybody involved to really make their stamp on the Call of Duty scene. And obviously, I know it did a ton for the European fans out there as well, right? That's another aspect that obviously I can't truly speak on. We're Canadian, so it was great to have that Canadian esports stamp as well. But it was really cool that you guys kind of did a lot for Canadian esports as well as European esports. So congratulations, and again, thank you for coming on.
Appreciate you guys having me. Like I said, I'm always tuned in, so I'll be tuning into those future videos to hear your guys' insights. No pun intended.
No pun
Let's
intended.
not rip them. Guys, let's also, if you can comment the amount of time we said insight in this video, you'll win you'll win a candy bar.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, thanks so much, guys, for watching. As always, like, subscribe, do all that sort of fun stuff. Comments down below, and see you guys next time.